Hi, my name is Marina Nakagawa. I'm a motion designer and 3D artist. If you're a motion designer learning 3D software, you might have asked yourself, which software should I learn, Blender or Cinema 4D? Today, I'm going to try to answer that question for you. Cinema 4D is used by the majority of motion design studios as their primary 3D software, while Blender is getting more and more popular among the 3D artists. And it's free, so which one should you learn? Let's find out! I make 3D stylized character for both my client and my personal project. I've been using Cinema 4D for about 5 years and I really enjoy it. The reason I started learning Blender was because I really wanted to try Blender's sculpting feature. I have seen so many posts on social media and YouTube by artists making really impressive models using Blender. I used to use Cinema 4D for box modeling and use ZBrush for adding details, and then went back to Cinema 4D for rigging and animating. Also, I was sculpting the character using ZBrush, retopologizing with Blender, and completing the rest of the process using Cinema 4D. Now, I use Blender for everything except using Substance Painter for making materials, which was not just speeded up my process, but also gave me lots of flexibility. Now, using the multiple software during the process is not a bad thing. A lot of artists do that, and I'm not saying that the Blender sculpting tool is as powerful as ZBrush is. This workflow just worked for me because my characters are stylized and simple enough for Blender to sculpt. A disclaimer, I'm still a beginner with Blender, but I'm really amazed by some of the cool functions Blender has. That being said, I still miss Cinema 4D in some ways, which I'm going to cover later. Now, when we talk about Cinema 4D versus Blender, I think there are 3 main questions people have. So first, I'm a beginner with 3D programs and I want to get 3D motion design jobs. Which software should I learn? Second, I'm already using Cinema 4D. Should I learn Blender too? And finally, is Blender difficult to learn compared to Cinema 4D? The answer, though, honestly, it really depends on the artist. But today, I'm going to compare these 2 software based on the workflow and toolsets they have. And I would love to share my opinions on these 3 questions as I now have used both Cinema 4D and Blender. First, let's talk about UI. Since Cinema 4D's S25 update, I think Cinema 4D's UI has become much simpler and quite similar to Blender. We have a viewport on the left, the object list on the top right, and the ability to control scene setting or parameters of each object in the scene on the bottom right. There are some handy presets layout on the top, and you can save your own layout too. Cinema 4D's viewport is very simple and user-friendly. Personally, I really like the toggle switch, which allows you to switch between 1 or 4 views. With Blender, the UI is much more customizable, but I have found it tricky to use that sometimes, especially if you're a beginner 3D artist. You can create as many view windows as you want. You can apply different camera views or apply any other window layout, which is great, but I moved or increased the window accidentally so many times and it can be quite irritating. But once I got used to it, it was okay. If you have ever watched any tutorial on Blender, you might feel overwhelmed by the amount of shortcut keys they use. Don't worry, I did too. Blender's shortcut key system is more layered than that of Cinema 4D in my opinion. In Cinema 4D, for example, if you want to move an object, you press E and Axis UI appears, allowing you to drag the object to a new position. To switch between world and local coordinates, you press this icon. In Blender, you press G to move an object, and instantly it starts following your cursor. You can then press X to move the object along the X-axis. And the same applies to other actions like rotate or scale. If you press GXX, you can move the object based on the local coordinate system. These shortcut combinations give you more flexible control, however, they require you to remember more shortcuts, which can be challenging for some users. One big difference I've found with how Blender works versus Cinema 4D is its modes. As you can see in the top left corner, we're currently in object mode. In this mode, We can add, move, rotate, or resize objects, but we can't edit its geometry. Once you select the object, you can check the other available modes. In Edit mode, you have control over edges, line, and faces. You can access modeling tools such as Extrude, Inset, and Knife tools, all of which are available in this mode. In Edit mode, you can only select the components of the selected object. For instance, if there are two objects on the screen and you are in the edit mode of one object, you cannot directly click on the other object to edit its shape. There are a couple of ways to switch between objects. You can click on the dot in the outliner, then now you can edit this object. Each mode in Blender has specific functions, so it's crucial to learn which function belongs to which mode. Some shortcuts have different functions depending on the mode. For example, pressing Ctrl R in Edit mode makes a loop cut, while in Sculpt mode, Ctrl R removes the object. Therefore, it's important to be aware of the mode you are in when working with Blender. I think overall, Cinema 4D's interface is easier to get used to. Blender has so many functions and it's really customizable, but can take longer to get used to at the beginning, at least it was for me. Okay, let's talk about modeling, as this was one of the main reasons I started learning Blender. In Cinema 4D, you can add primary object from the icon and adjust its properties such as size, segment count, and fillet radius as long as you don't make the object editable. Once the object is editable, you can use tools such as Cut, Extrude, Inset, and Bevel to shape it. In Blender, you can add object using the Shift-A shortcut, which brings up the list of available objects. You can only change an object's parameters when it is first added. Once you deselect the object or move it, you can no longer modify its properties. Compared to Cinema 4D, Blender provides fewer options to control an object's properties. As I mentioned before, to edit the object geometry, you need to switch to Edit mode. Let's talk a bit about Cinema 4D's Deformer tool. I think this is my favorite tool with Cinema 4D and miss it a lot when I'm using Blender. It's really easy to use and the interface is really intuitive to understand. You can use this tool not just for modeling, but also as an easy rig or animating tool. You can do a similar thing using the modifier tool in Blender. Let's select the object and go to the modifier tab by clicking this wrench icon, and you can see a lot of different types of modifier. Let's select the simple deform modifier. You can do similar thing like bend or twist, but these are not as flexible as Cinema 4D's deformer tool in my opinion. But as I said at the beginning, Blender's sculpting tool was the reason I started learning Blender, and it's very powerful. It has a lot of useful brushes and masking tools. It also has two dynamic remeshing tools called Dyne Topo and Remesh. These tools allow you to sculpt without worrying about topology or where you're going to add cuts. You can create models in a much more intuitive way, like playing with clay. One more great thing about Blender's sculpting tool is the multi-res modifier. Here is the character model I made. I want to rig and animate this character, so I don't want to subdivide the mesh anymore. But I'd like to add the finer details. The multi-res modifier is super helpful for this type of work. Once I subdivide the model using multi-res modifier, it works like a normal subdivision tool, and you can now see the amount of polygon has increased. But if you lower the number of level viewport from 4 to 2, you can see it still keeps the original lower resolution model. You can add finer details to the model, but it still stores the original resolution, and you can change the subdivision anytime you want. You can render as it is, or you can export the normal map if you need. Cinema 4D also has sculpting features, and it has a layer system, which works similarly to multi-res modifiers. You can use layers just like in Photoshop, but you can't rig this model as it is. If you want to rig it, you have to bake the sculpt first, but I think it's a pretty cool feature. However, Cinema 4D's sculpting function doesn't offer as many brush options as Blender. Cinema 4D's new remeshing tool is quite useful, although it is not as powerful as other dynamic remeshing tools such as ZBrush and Blender. So in terms of the modeling, I feel that Blender has more capabilities for modeling or sculpting to create a wide range of styles of model. Cinema 4D has less ability in terms of modeling, but it has a lot of tools like Deformer or Volume Builder to support you even if you're a beginner. Also, a lot of these tools work totally procedurally, therefore you can adjust the model whenever you want, which is a benefit for artists. Next, let's look at the animation features between Cinema 4D and Blender. With both Cinema 4D and Blender, you can either use an auto keyframing tool, or you can simply add keyframes to certain properties. Both software have a dope sheet and graph editor. You can add keyframes to the object, change the timing of it, and edit the curve to make a more interesting animation. So, in terms of the animating tools, I think Cinema 4D and Blender are pretty close to each other. I don't think many people really enjoy making UV maps. Especially with Cinema 4D, UV mapping has been a bit of an infamous function among the user community. But Maxon has updated their UV mapping over the years. I find that the latest UV mapping system with Cinema 4D works okay most of the time. Personally, I have been using the paid plugin called FDUV Toolkit by Fabio Diniz, which I find very handy and worth paying for. I think Blender's UV unwrapping tool is a bit easier to use compared to Cinema 4D. All you need to do is select the edges you want to add cut, press U, then select Mark Seam. Now once you are happy with the edges you selected, then you can select all of the geometries, tap U again, and select Unwrap. Overall, I think both Cinema 4D and Blender are good for UV mapping, but I personally find that Blender is simpler and more intuitive to use. I would say both texturing tools are powerful. They both have a material editor and node-based texture editor you can use for making complex materials. Also, a lot of people are fascinated by the capabilities of Blender's cell shaders. It's really powerful and flexible. You can make really cool stylized texture, or making something look like anime, or even something look like Netflix's show Arcane. You can try so many different types of looks. In Cinema 4D, Sketch and Toon has been available for a while, but it's still quite limited and slow to render, and it hasn't been updated for years. So I would say both texturing tools are good, but if you want to make a lot of toon shading renders, then I would recommend trying Blender. Cinema 4D and Blender both have great rigging tools that you can either start from scratch or use very helpful preset rigs you can customize, even if you're not a professional rigger. The Cinema 4D's rigging tool is called Character Tool. You can build a rig, bind it, and animate your character easily. But the rig you build is not super easy to customize, so if you want to do that, you would need more technical knowledge about the rigging system. A lot of character artists love Blender because it has a very good rigging system, and I love it too. With Blender, you can use Rigify as a built-in add-on. It's a really powerful rigging tool you can build using presets rig, or you can build a rig from scratch. It gives you a lot of twig bonds to pose your character easily, and flexible controllers and parameters you can control for animating. There is also a paid plugin called Auto Rig Pro, which is easier to use compared to Rigify and has more functions. And if you want to learn rigging using Rigify or Auto Rig Pro, I'd recommend to check the YouTube channel by CG Dive. So, I think in terms of rigging, Blender has the advantage of creating an advanced, complex rig. Although you can still use physical rendering with Cinema 4D, I think most of the Cinema 4D users are using external GPU renderers like Octane or Redshift. I love using Redshift personally. It is so easy to use, allows you to switch between fast rendering preview and the bucket mode, and rendering is really quick. Blender has two built-in renderers called Eevee and Cycles. Eevee is a very fast GPU renderer, but the lighting is not physically accurate. It is also used for rendering cel shading look images. Cycle, on the other hand, takes time to render, but it gives you photorealistic render images. To switch between the Eevee and Cycle is easy. Click the camera icon and set the render engine. To see the render preview, you need to set the shading mode. Go to the right top corner and click the icon. This basically allows you to switch between different types of shading on the viewport. So you can achieve really good render results with both Cinema 4D and Blender. However, with Cinema 4D, you have to pay extra to achieve the photorealistic look at the realistic work speed. There are some functions that one software has which the other doesn't. One of the functions people love about Cinema 4D is MoGraph. It is a unique and powerful tool which makes Cinema 4D really stand out among the other 3D softwares. It's so easy and intuitive to use, and you can make quite complex animations very easily. Blender has geometry nodes which you can use to create very similar types of animations to MoGraph, but geometry node is not just a MoGraph tool, and you can do many more complex things than just making clones and animating them. However, it's a node-based system and it can be challenging to learn, especially if you're not familiar with nodes. One of the Blender's very unique tools is Grease Pencil, which allows you to draw and animate in 3D space. I haven't tried to use it yet, but there are tons of amazing artworks out there. Blender also has a compositing tool. Also, both Cinema 4D and Blender has simulation tools. I won't talk about these functions simply because I don't have much experience with this tool. So my conclusion is Cinema 4D and Blender are very good software in different ways. Cinema 4D is quite easy to learn. It has intuitive UIs and a lot of cool functions like Deformer or MoGraph to support creating cool things, even if you're a beginner artist. Most of these tools are designed to work procedurally, which gives artists as much flexibility as possible. And if you want to achieve more specific skills, you probably need to buy another software or renderer, but it gives you more ability to create great artworks. Blender, on the other hand, is free and it's very powerful. The learning curve can be harder than Cinema 4D, but that's because Blender has more flexibility and a wider variety of toolsets to achieve so many different styles of artworks. There are also tons of built-in and paid add-ons out there, which gives options and variety to artists. Personally, I really am glad that I started learning Blender because of the sculpting tool and the rigging tool. And if you're interested in making 3D character animation, then I would recommend trying Blender. So, now I have given my thought on how Blender and Cinema 4D compare. Let me answer those 3 questions I mentioned at the beginning of this video. First, you can choose whichever software you prefer. But in terms of the 3D motion design jobs, the majority of motion design studios are still using Cinema 4D as their primary 3D software. Therefore, in a hiring situation, they may ask you if you can use Cinema 4D due to the existing pipeline they already have. Some recruiters I spoke to told me that the main skills clients are looking for regards to the motion design jobs are still Cinema 4D. However, I have contacted a number of studios and some of them have told me that they are now more open to using Blender with their pipeline, and they're happy to hire Blender artists. And I'm pretty sure there will be more and more studios will use both Cinema 4D and Blender in the future. Even though if you're a happy Cinema 4D user, because everyone on social media now say Blender is the best, Blender is free, you might have asked yourself, or should I learn Blender too? I personally don't think you need to worry about switching to Blender or learning Blender alongside Cinema 4D, unless you have any specific reason to learn Blender like me. Each software has its own advantage, as I mentioned, but in the end, work matters more than software. So it really depends on the artist. For me, it was challenging, but I also have seen quite a lot of artists say learning Blender is easier than Cinema 4D for them. I feel like the difference between Blender and Cinema 4D are pretty similar to how built PC and Apple products are different. So to me, Blender is like building a PC. It requires more technical understanding of how each tool works, and you probably have to remember more shortcut keys, but It gives you more flexibility and more choices of styles of artwork. Cinema 4D, on the other hand, has very visual-oriented UIs and functions, which are like Apple products. Each tool is designed to be visually straightforward, and that make me or other artists say Cinema 4D is easier to learn. But that also makes Cinema 4D as not as flexible as Blender, and it costs more. Which one you prefer is really up to you. Blender also updates quite frequently, and some functions and shortcuts have been changed over the years, which could be a bit confusing for some beginners like me who learned from tutorials or courses made a few years back. If you want to learn Blender, my advice is to take notes. This is my notes. I write down some shortcuts and process I think I will use frequently. And of course, be patient. So that's it. I really hope this video could give you a bit better idea of which software you want to go for. We will make more Cinema 4D and Blender content in the future, so please subscribe this channel. By the way, if you're interested in learning more about Cinema 4D, go to schoolofmotion.com and check the Cinema 4D Basecamp. Please let me know in the comments section what you think about each software, and let me know if you have any questions. I'd love to see what people think.